Welcome to another episode of Tactical Tuesday with Modern Milsim. Through this podcast, we will bring you real-world tactics, techniques, and procedures that will enable you to succeed on the Milsim battlefield. It's time to get ready. Hello, and welcome to episode 30 of Tactical Tuesday with Modern Milsim. I am your host, Craig White. As always, thank you for being here. Now, today we are continuing our discussion regarding limited penetration room entry, also known as LimPen, and related tactics, techniques, and procedures. Be aware that this series of episodes is intended to provide a more basic understanding of CQB TTPs. For a more detailed explanation of these tactics, techniques, and procedures, check out From Insertion to Extraction, Advanced Milsim CQB Tactics, Techniques, and Procedures, now available at Amazon.com. As before, the topics of this episode builds on the TTPs discussed in prior episodes. These previously discussed TTPs link with the lessons from this and future episodes to create an overall method for breaching and clearing rooms. So with that in mind, let's get to it. In our last episode of this podcast, we discussed the basic TTPs for conducting limited penetration room entries. As with all room entry techniques, there are variations in the TTPs used to perform limited penetration room entry. Once you and your entry team have mastered the basic TTPs of LimPen, you can move on to adding different variations of the method to your team's toolbox. One thing I want to address at this point in this episode is that point and second men want to utilize the 45-90-45 method of diminishing sectors as opposed to slicing the pie in much smaller increments. You want to clear as much of the room as possible in a relatively quick fashion from outside of the room before breaching it to clear the hard corners. If your team intends to clear a room with a closed door, you will not have the luxury of diminishing sectors in an incremental fashion. Once the door is open, most, if not all, angles in the room will be activated and surprise will be lost. For point and second men, clear the room from your side of the door frame quickly using the 45-90-45 method. Examples of execution of limited penetration room clearing method is depicted in the Pro's Guide to CQB done by Eli Fieldboy from Project Gecko. A link to this video series is listed on the Tactical Tuesday with Modern Milsim's Facebook page. Check it out. So let's talk about the first variation, the single man engagement. The first variation of the LimPen method is the single man engagement. In this variation, the point man clears the target room from the near side of the doorway or entry point to the target room. The second man, also known as the wingman, is located just off the front team member's shoulder and either covers the direction of movement or the point man's most exposed flank. As the formation moves forward, the wingman's primary sector or area of responsibility is to protect the point man's flanks. As such, he can move to either side of the primary team member as necessary to do so. The wingman formation is often utilized by two-man elements while moving through hallways and large rooms. It relies on nonverbal communication and techniques such as muzzle before flesh to be effective. Once the majority of the target room has been cleared, point man and wingman enter the room to clear the near hard corners. So let's talk about the wingman formation for a moment. With this formation, the point man directs the movement of the wingman depending on where he is facing and where he is moving. His area of responsibility is to cover the direction of the formation's movement. In other words, the front of the formation relative to where the point man is facing. With most team TTPs, the wingman is also the second man of the entry team. Because point and wingman will be working in close proximity to each other in confined spaces, the muzzle beyond flesh safety rule is used. Muzzle before flesh means that each member of the formation must extend their respective weapon muzzles beyond the flesh of their teammate. In that respect, the supporting wingman needs to extend his weapon muzzle beyond the point man's body and remain in contact between the point man's shoulder and his own on the wingman's strong side. If the wingman is positioned with his weak side toward the point man, he should extend his weak side elbow out and into the point man's ribs below the armpit. Such physical contact prevents friendly fire in the event that one of the two team members flinch away from an immediate threat. It also works to push the other team member away from the perceived threat as well. Staying in body contact with an adjacent entry team member also allows him or her to know exactly where you are without having to verbally communicate with you. Many more modern CQB techniques rely more on these unspoken communications in an effort to maintain stealth. An example of Wingman Formation movement is also contained in the Pro's Guide to CQB video series mentioned earlier in this podcast. So now that we have explained how the basic Wingman Formation works, let's talk in more detail concerning how the point man engagement variation of LimPen is performed. So here's the procedure. First, point man covers the entry point of the target room as he moves toward it. At the same time, wingman covers the point man's outside flank, or the entry point, to the target room as per entry team TTPs. Second, point man begins clearing the room from the near angle, while wingman covers threats down the long axis of the hallway. Third, point man moves to the 45-degree angle to continue visually clearing the interior of the target room, while the wingman continues to cover potential deep threats down the hallway. As he does so, wingman moves and stays in physical contact with the point man. Fourth, point man moves to the 90-degree position to visually clear the center of the target room. At the same time, wingman prepares to transition to enter the target room while still covering the long axis down the hallway. Fifth, point man moves across the line of departure using a button hook technique before crossing the room to the opposite or far wall. As he does so, point man engages any threats located in the near side of the room. At the same time, wingman visually clears the opposite hard corner before turning 180 degrees to support point man in clearing his hard corner. Sixth, as soon as wingman determines that the target room is clear, he takes a position on the door frame facing down the hall in the direction that point man was moving before entering the target room. Once point man has cleared the target room, he takes up a position that is behind and in physical contact with the wingman. At that point, the two team members switch responsibilities, with the wingman becoming point man and vice versa. The wingman formation then re-enters the hallway and moves to the next target room. In this variation, third and fourth men provide security for point and second men from outside of the target room. This particular technique requires that both the first and second men be familiar with each other's movement and nonverbal communication. As such, I don't recommend this variation for entry team members that do not practice this variation on a regular basis. Now, the next variation of LimPen is the room peek. In this variation of limited penetration room entry, the entry team does not fully enter the target room. Instead, once the majority of the target room is cleared, either a point or both point and second men peek down the inside wall to clear their respective near corners. Like in the single man engagement, in this variation, third and fourth men provide security for point and second men from outside of the target room. This variation works well so long as the target room does not contain any dead space or other doors leading out of the target room. Otherwise, the entry team will likely need to enter the room to clear any dead space present within it. And then finally, we have the dual man / two-stage room clearing variation. In this variation, the point man begins clearing the inside of the target room from the near side of the entry point using a modified 45-90-45 technique. Point man proceeds to clear the target room until he reaches the 90-degree position without proceeding to the 135-degree position. As point man reaches the 90-degree position, second man takes a position just off the point man's outside shoulder. Second man then continues to move in an arc similar to that which is used in the deliberate room entry method around the entry point until he reaches a final position on the opposite side of the entry point. While moving, second man engages the enemy as he encounters them. Once point and second men eliminate enemy visible in the room, they use a short breach or a quick peek to clear the target room's hard corners. Again, third and fourth men position themselves behind and outside of point man to provide security down the hallway. This variation is similar to the single man engagement variation except that when point man reaches the 90-degree position of clearing the target room from the door, second man moves across the doorway and takes a position on the opposite side of the door frame. Upon reaching that position, second man will proceed to clear the interior of the target room on the opposite side. In addition to the issues common to all room clearing methods that have been identified in previous episodes of this podcast, there are several that are particularly common with performing limited penetration room clearing. First, avoid overexposure in doorway and entry points. Entry team members must avoid exposing themselves unnecessarily to the enemy. Use the sides of the doorway or entry point for the cover that it is. Leaning too far into the entry point will expose entry team members to enemy fire. Next, watch muzzle flagging and telegraphing. Entry team members must avoid exposing the muzzle of their weapons beyond the plane of the doorway or entry point and using angles to utilize cover effectively while engaging the enemy. Then we have exposure to area effect weapons. Only first and second men need to be positioned near the doorway to the target room. The rest of the entry team, as well as any support elements, need to be dispersed to prevent the entire team from getting smoked by one grenade attack. And then finally, we have point and second men need to be armed with submachine guns. Under the rules of many Milsim event organizers, the submachine gun is the only weapon allowed to fire full auto with no minimum engagement distance within a building. As such, and whenever possible, the point and second men need to be armed with submachine guns. They can use the advantage of such firepower in close quarters to eliminate enemy inside the target room. Riflemen should be used primarily in a security or support role, except where submachine gunners are not available. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Tactical Tuesday. Tune in for our next episode when we're going to discuss tactics, techniques, and procedures related to maneuvering through hallways, as well as clearing hallway corners and intersections. If you have any topics you would like to see covered in future episodes of Tactical Tuesday, please let us know by posting it on the Modern Milsim Facebook page. If it's not one of the topics that we already plan to cover, we will likely add it to our ever-growing topic list. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, as well as on many other podcast directories. As always, thank you for your support, and I'll see you at our next episode. See you then. To our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to providing you with new episodes every 2 weeks. If you like what you're hearing on this podcast, please subscribe and provide us with a review. We want to know what you like and how we can improve. You can also contact us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Modern Milsim with any suggestions you may have. In our next episode of Tactical Tuesday, we will discuss tactics, techniques, and procedures related to maneuvering through hallways, as well as clearing hallway corners and intersections. If you want to know more about application of real-world tactics, techniques, and procedures to Milsim, check out From Alpha to Omega, a Milsim tactical primer and training manual, as well as From Insertion to Extraction, Advanced Milsim CQB Tactics, Techniques, and Procedures. Both books are available at Amazon.com. As always, thank you for your support, and I'll see you at our next installment of Tactical Tuesday.